Have you ever thought why everything in the modern science fiction is so dystopian? Sometimes it feels like 95 or maybe even 99% of the science fiction books are written about some future galactic war or depleted Earth or some sort of futuristic primitives, neo-barbarism, etc., etc., etc. Why is it so? Can't the science fiction writers write something about the great future of humanity, something light and something encouraging? Well, I guess they can, of course, but I think there is two reasons why they don't do it. And today we're going to explore those two reasons. Hi, I'm Nick Hein, and on this channel I'm overloading my brain trying to talk with crappy accent and very bad grammar about the books and any other things related to writing and reading. So, why is there so much darkness and depressive feelings in the modern science fiction? It's not that the books depicting the utopian future of humanity or whatever other species are not existing. There are, of course, some examples of those. The most notorious of them, in my opinion, are the Culture series by Banks and maybe, probably, though I'm not really greatly familiar with that universe, the Star Trek multiverse. I don't know, guys. If you know better than me, please write in the comments. But I think it's also some really good example of utopian future, because all the conflicts in the Star Trek universe are happening on the brims of that great Star Trek society. And within this society it looks pretty much utopian. Some readers are going as far as call it communistic utopia, and honestly, me being from the Soviet background, I was born in the USSR, I'm kinda dubious about that, but I can't tell really much about that because I don't dig much into the Star Trek universe. I've seen the first TV show, I like it very much, but it's not taking us as deep into the society. It's more like adventure show. Please tell me. Anyway, those are just few scarce exceptions from the general rule. And the general rule is that the most of the modern science fiction is evolving around some sort of dystopian future, or maybe not future, but some sort of dystopian parallel universe. But anyway, that's just basically the same thing. So why? And I think there is two main reasons for that. And the first reason is quite simple. Just take a look around. It's really hard to project our current state into the future as utopian. Looking back into our history, it's obvious that we as a humanity, as a civilization, made a long way from the ancient Egypt or something like this. And obviously the quality of life is much better in most parts of the world. And the state of the human rights also is much better in most parts of the world comparing to the ancient Egypt times, or maybe, I don't know, Viking times or something like this. But it's still obvious that we're struggling and we don't know what to do else. I think the biggest problem for the whole world is we're not really understanding right now how to take the next step, what the next step should be. The literature, including the science fiction and the fantasy and magic realism and whatever genre you would pick, is the reflection of reality. I know it may sound not as obvious for many, but try to think a little bit deeper. Any writer's work based on his experience and knowledge. And his experience and knowledge really don't differ much from ours. It's the same world we live in. It's the same knowledge, it's the same conflicts, the same problems, whatever. Arguably, we're living in the world the best so far we had in our history, arguably. Somebody will probably object, but that's topic for another video. But it's obviously not the best possible world. I totally disagree with the idea that there was some golden past and right now the civilization is in decline. It's not the case. It's really hard to tell for us because we are living in the moment. That such things could be discussed only in retrospection. So probably the scientists, the historians will discuss this properly somewhere in the future, somewhere maybe 20 or even 50 years later, and then they will be more objective than us. But I still think what we have right now is the some sort of best working model. It's really not working well, but previously it wasn't working. It was working even worse. So right now we have the best working model of our civilization. But it's obvious it's not the best possible model. And we need to figure out what it's gonna be. But it's really hard to do because we don't know any better. Actually, there was some tries, like for example, the great and really bloody and messy experiment on the landscape of the USSR. I was born in the USSR. I know a thing or two about living in the communist society, and it wasn't really a communist society. Actually, it wasn't at all a communist society. It was a really messy thing, and it's not working like that. I don't know, maybe in some distant future we will have some post-scarcity communist utopia, bank style or Star Trek style, or maybe the style the Soviet sci-fi writers were depicting. And of course in the Soviet Union the utopia was a really popular genre, and there was a lot of writers, talented and really bad ones, writing about the great communist future of the humanity. Well, it's arguable that we should have the communist utopia in the future. I'm not going say we should, I'm not going say it's a disaster, but in my opinion, to project in the future the current state of affairs, the current civilization, it doesn't feel like utopian at all. And to think that somewhere, maybe, I don't know, like 10,000 years forward, we will still live in the capitalist society, in the nationalist society, is pretty stupid idea. But we don't know what is our best next step. We need to figure that out. What we are trying to do at the moment, well, I guess hopefully some best of our minds trying to do that at the moment. And the science fiction writers also are in the same trap as all of us. And they are trying to figure that out, but they also need to make a living. And it's really hard to write a good book about the utopian society that any normal person can relate to. It's really hard to relate to the people who don't have any problems. And here we're coming to the second reason why a lot of science fiction is so dystopian. And that reason has nothing to do with the politics, economics or whatever. It has to do with the basic rules of literature. And the basic rule of the literature is that for the good plot you need some good conflict. And it's really hard to imagine a good conflict in the utopian society. Where the conflict should come from if everybody is happy? That's really hard to do. The only trick that the writers are using, like the same banks for example, or the Star Trek universe, or even the Soviet sci-fi utopian writers, it's always the outside context. Like this great utopian happy society meeting something that is not. Here comes the conflict. It's almost never this conflict lays within that society. Take the Ian Banks Culture once again. It's a great series. It's one of my favorite series in all the sci-fi. But we don't know as much about the culture itself as about what's going on the edges of the culture. It's always about the culture conflicts with something else, or maybe something else trying to conflict with culture, not really understanding that it's a really uneven conflict. It's like culture just disposing of them like this. And the same goes for the Star Trek. We don't know much about the inner Star Trek society, and whenever the writer trying to describe somehow the inner structure of the utopian society, he almost always going into the pretty much boring info dump overridden books. I can't say the Kim Stanley Robinson is a bad writer, and his Mars trilogy is pretty good one, but it still was really hard read for me, because he constantly going into the details of this society without much really going on around that. There is a niche for such books, and there is a readers for such books. Well, I read them, but it's still a really hard read. It's always easier and honestly more fun to read the book about some action, bright conflict, bright characters, bright antagonists, really like doing stuff. It's not necessarily should be some dark cyberpunk stuff, Neuromancer style of by William Gibson, or some sort of, I don't know, or some sort of neo-noir thriller like let's say, I don't know, Altered Carbon or something like that, or neo-imperial, futuristic imperial science fiction like Dune. It could be maybe less dark, but it still needs something flashy, some conflict, some passion, some emotions. And as I said, it's really hard. I'm writing the stuff myself. I'm writing the sci-fi stories, and I know by experience that it's really you need something to going on, and it's really hard to imagine something going on in the society where everybody is totally happy. Of course, there will be some personal issues, but if you want to write something about personal issues, you don't really need the sci-fi thing into this. You can just write a normal novel, and why bother with inventing the whole world? And the inventing the whole world by itself not making a great book. You need some characters in this book. And here we come again. We need something to happen. And I think that's one of the main reasons why a lot of writers are just not going into this. It's like, well, it would be unjust to call it an easy way to write some sort of dystopian science fiction. And I'm taking the dystopian like the broader definition. It's not like exactly some fascist future like in Orwell, or something post-apocalyptic like in The Postman by David Brin. It's just the future where some sort of empire, or our capitalist problems of capitalist society projected into the future. It's all could be called to some extent dystopian, because they are obviously not utopian. And it takes a great talent to write a proper utopian science fiction that modern reader, modern audience can relate to. So that's basically my take on why almost all the modern sci-fi is so dark. If you disagree with me, feel free to add it into the comment. It will be really interesting to discuss with you. As for me, I've said all I wanted, so that was Nick Hein. Bye!